Congressman Steve Russell, Republican representative from Oklahoma. He sits on the House Armed Services Committee, the Government Oversight and Reform Committee, and the Committee on Education and the Workforce. He's a retired Army officer, a former Ranger, who served in Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Iraq, and he commanded the unit that played a key role in the capture of Saddam Hussein. He wrote a piece about that experience entitled "We Got Him," a memoir of the hunt and capture of Saddam Hussein. He joins me from Capitol Hill. Last week, the House passed the visa waiver program. You voted for it. Can you quickly explain the details?
Sure. 38 countries now you can come to the United States for up to 90 days for any reason. If you're approved for the initial program, the approval lasts 2 years. You don't have to state why you're here. You could be going to Disneyland, conducting business, or nefarious purposes. It's a problem. It's where we're vulnerable. So now the visa waiver bill that we address will require them to have passports that meet our standards. Right now, Great Britain is the only one that qualifies for that. It allows them to continue the program, but they have to share their terror watch list, Interpol. They have to do a lot more intelligence sharing on terror specifically. It just raises the bar, and this is where our most vulnerable gap was. I'm glad to see that we've moved the conversation away from asylum seekers so much to where the real gaping hole is. And so I'm very excited that we got this passed. It does immediate material good for the security of our country.
And the Senate expected to pass it and the president to sign it, right?
Yes, the White House has indicated that they see this as a key vulnerability, and they have indicated support.
We've upped our airstrikes in Iraq and Syria. Special forces going in. Should we do more?
I think we have, a broad enough hammer for certain military results, but the problem is, Larry, we don't have an anvil, and a hammer without an anvil is just a swing. Right now, you have no real ground force of any kind. The Special Operations Forces are doing good work, but in terms of taking away the key symbolic and territorial things that ISIS possesses, we have to put together a coalition, I believe pan-Arab coalition. You've got Russian interest with the Alawites in Damascus. You've got the Iranian influence that's dealing with the Shia Arab, but the Sunni Arab has no place to go. We have to address this, and while we've been supportive of the Kurds, when they start getting down into Raqqa there in Syria, which is the symbolic capital of ISIS, this is going to start to be a problem. So we can get short-term military gain, but unless we address the larger political issue of the disenfranchised Sunni Arab and where he goes after this, we're just swinging in the air.
Historically, we don't look at larger issues, do we?
It is amazing to me, Larry, how much we have just stovepiped thinking in this administration in terms of our foreign policy. Look, there are great professionals that have served administration to administration. They've served even some of the president's cabinet. They have served in different Republican and Democratic administrations. The president is getting advice, but I get the sense that maybe this is an annoyance to him. This is a world problem. We have the capacity to deal with it, and there's a couple of immediate things we can do militarily, but we have to get some political solutions. We need to sit down with the Russians as well.
On your side of the ledger, Congressman, is Trump harmful or helpful to this situation?
I think Trump, he clearly articulates the anger that Americans feel about being unsafe. But look, I've looked in astonishment as we have had people on the left that want to take away our Second Amendment rights, and on the right that want to take away our First Amendment rights. How about we stick with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and let's keep our civil liberties while we find ways to protect our country. And we can do that, but we cannot, we can't just close our borders. For one, there are treaty obligations that we have that it would violate constitutional law.
The Second Amendment doesn't prevent background checks, though, does it?
We already have background checks, Larry. This is one of the things that a lot of people are not aware of. You hear a lot of political hay right now about we should, prevent terrorists on the terror watch list from purchasing a firearm. Newsflash, that sale wouldn't go through. I'm probably uniquely insightful in this regard, owning a firearms manufacturing company. I've called in hundreds of these background checks, very familiar with the National Instant Check System that's run by the FBI in cooperation with the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. If you are a non-resident legal alien, but you are non-resident, you can't purchase a firearm. You can't be in possession of one. You can't receive one except under very narrow circumstances, like maybe you've been approved by the State Department for a hunting trip or something of that nature, or maybe you serve in security for a head of state or something that's on a visit. Those are those narrow exceptions. So this notion that anyone can just walk into a gun store and walk out with thermonuclear weapons is just absurd.
Does it disturb you, though, Congressman, that we lead the world in gun shootings?
Even that I would dispute, because a lot of the statistical data that you see on gun violence, they include suicides as a part of that figure. And while suicides are certainly violent and they're tragic, and as you well know, being a strong veterans advocate, I'm very concerned about veteran suicide. But the problem that we have is when you skew the statistics that way, it doesn't paint the real picture. What we do see, and statistically this is proven in every case in the country, in the most draconian areas of gun laws, we find where the highest impact of these gun crimes have effect, or domestic terror, or even foreign base terror. Gun-free zone becomes a soft target, high casualties. I'll tell you where these things aren't occurring. They're not occurring in places that have strong and good Second Amendment laws.
Would you arm the populace?
I think the framers decided that early on in 1789, that it is the right of the people to defend themselves. It is God-given. He didn't make us with fangs and claws or quills or odors for our defense. Instead, he gave us our intelligence and, by extension, implements to put in our hands for our defense. Some would choose to use firearms, and it's a constitutional right. Personally, I think that's good. We've seen incidents, for example, if you were to take the incident with the cartoonist and the Draw Muhammad type of things that were occurring some months ago. There were two jihadist type terrorists that wanted to attack a place in Dallas. They showed up with the same types of arms that would have been used in San Bernardino, and they both got shot in the head, end of story. Much different prospect in Texas than you saw in California, unfortunately.
And the Second Amendment, though, mentions militia. There are no militias now.
Well, this is really laid out very, very clearly in Blackstones Law. You go back and you look from William and Mary all the way to how our framers put together the Constitution. I can cite you reference after reference where the people are the militia. That is so clearly established in the writings of our framers and founders. And this is why we've seen in recent cases with the Supreme Court, with Heller and McDonald, of why we continue to have the ability to defend ourselves.
But that same Constitution allows the Constitution to be amended to correct things that were wrong.
It does. We've certainly seen examples of that. It's interesting to note, Larry, that the 14th Amendment that was, essential in protecting the rights of Black Americans started out as a Second Amendment issue. They were not allowed to bear arms and defend their property and to retain property. The 14th Amendment later followed, and you can go back and look at that. I think that we have righted wrongs when we've seen them in the past, but it is a two-thirds process by states. It's a very thorough process. I don't think that we need to create more soft targets to create us safer. That seems to be counterintuitive.
Always great talking to you. Thank you so much, Congressman.
I appreciate it, Larry. Thanks for having me on.
Congressman Steve Russell, Republican from Oklahoma.